Have you ever wondered what it feels like to lose an entire town? Not because of time, but because of rising waters. Driving along the quiet roads of Kentucky, I felt a mix of curiosity and unease, imagining families forced to leave their homes, memories, and the streets they loved. These ghost towns aren't just abandoned buildings, they are silent witnesses to lives interrupted by floods, stories of resilience, heartbreak, and human endurance. Join me as we explore the hidden remnants of Van Buren, Neatsville, Scuffletown, Cloverport, and Old Kutuwa, and step into a past that the waters tried to erase. If you love exploring haunted and abandoned places, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our ghost hunt family. 1 Van Buren, Taylorsville Lake area. I remember the first time I heard about Van Buren. It was my grandfather who told me about the town, showing me old faded photographs of homes, a small church, and streets that no longer exist. He used to say that Van Buren was a place where people really knew each other, where kids played freely on dirt roads, and neighbors were more like extended family. I had always imagined it as a warm, cozy place, but I never thought I would actually visit the area where it once stood. One summer, I decided to go explore the remains of Van Buren. Driving through the quiet roads around Taylorsville Lake, there was a strange feeling in the air, almost like the town was holding its breath, waiting for someone to remember it. I parked near the edge of the lake and looked around. There were no houses, no streets, just a few scattered foundations barely visible through the grass and water. It was surreal. I could almost picture the town alive again. Children running down the streets, women hanging laundry, and men gathering to talk at the local store. But all of that was gone, replaced by the calm, quiet lake and the soft rustling of trees. As I walked along the shoreline, I noticed small remnants of the town, old bricks, pieces of wood, and even what looked like part of a fence post. Every step I took felt heavy, like I was walking through someone's memories. I imagined the families who had to leave everything behind when the dam was constructed. I wondered how it felt to pack up your life, knowing your home would be underwater soon. Could I have done it? Would I have cried, leaving the only place I had ever called home? I found a small clearing by the water and just sat there, letting the sounds of nature fill the space where the town once buzzed with life. It was peaceful, but also sad. There was a strange beauty in seeing nature reclaim what humans had built, yet I couldn't shake off the feeling of loss. Van Buren wasn't just a ghost town. It was a story of lives interrupted, of communities erased by progress. I felt honored to witness it, even in its quiet, empty state. Driving back, I kept thinking about how many other towns are out there, hiding under lakes or abandoned after floods, carrying their stories quietly. Van Buren left a deep mark on me, not just because of its history, but because it reminded me how fragile our sense of home really is, and how memories can keep a place alive long after the buildings are gone. 2. Neatsville, Adair County. I first heard about Neatsville from an old map I found in my grandfather's attic. The map had a tiny dot marked Neatsville, and next to it, someone had written, "Flooded, moved twice." I had never heard of the town before, but the thought of a place that no longer existed sparked something in me. I wanted to see it, to feel what remained of a town that had been forced to disappear. Driving through Adair County, I could sense the change in the landscape. The roads became narrow, lined with tall grass and old trees, and there was a quiet stillness that you don't usually find in places where people live. I parked near what I was told used to be the town center, and immediately, I felt a mix of curiosity and sadness. There was nothing left but fields, a few scattered foundations, and an old, crumbling church that had somehow resisted the floodwaters over the years. As I walked around, I tried to imagine life here before the reservoir was built. Families must have walked these paths daily, children playing near the river, neighbors visiting each other's homes. I felt a strange connection, almost like I could hear faint echoes of voices from the past. I wondered how the people of Neatsville felt when they had to leave everything behind, twice no less. Knowing that their homes would be submerged and their lives uprooted, could anyone ever get used to that kind of loss? The thought made my chest tighten. I sat down on a small mound overlooking what is now part of the reservoir. The water reflected the sky, calm and endless, hiding the town beneath. I imagined families packing their belongings, saying goodbye to the only home they had ever known. I pictured the elderly couple who had lived in the same house for decades, walking away slowly, holding hands, looking back at their past one last time. I could almost hear their whispers in the wind, telling stories of birthdays, weddings, and everyday life that no longer existed. Walking back to my car, I picked up a few weathered bricks from the ground and held them in my hands. They were small, but heavy with history. Neatsville had disappeared physically, but its stories remained in these fragments, in the quiet air, in the hearts of people who had once lived there. I left the site feeling a strange mix of melancholy and gratitude. Seeing Neatsville, even in its absence, reminded me of the resilience of humans, of communities that hold each other together, even when the world changes drastically. It also made me reflect on the fleeting nature of life and the importance of remembering places and people who once shaped the land around us. 3. Scuffletown, Henderson County. I first heard about Scuffletown from an old newspaper clipping my uncle had kept. The headline read, "Scuffletown, devastated by flood." It was dated 1937, and even though I had never visited the place, something about the words pulled me in. Years later, I finally made the trip to Henderson County to see what was left of the town. Driving down the quiet country roads, I felt an unusual mix of excitement and unease. The landscape was peaceful now, green fields, scattered trees, and the gentle curve of the Ohio River. But I couldn't help but imagine the chaos that had once swept through here. I parked near a low-lying area that I was told had been the heart of the town and stepped out. Immediately, a wave of silence hit me. No people, no cars, no shops, just the soft sound of wind brushing through the tall grass. Walking around, I noticed subtle signs of human presence, a few broken bricks, pieces of rusted metal, and the outline of what might have been a house foundation. I paused often, trying to picture life before the flood. I imagined families waking up to the sound of the river swelling, children playing near the banks, and neighbors hurrying to warn each other as the water rose. It was haunting to realize that a single natural event could erase an entire community in just hours. I found a small, slightly elevated hill and sat there for a while, letting my thoughts settle. I tried to imagine the emotions of the residents that day, the fear, the confusion, and the heartbreak of leaving everything behind. I thought about the elderly couple who had spent their entire lives here, the children who had grown up running these streets, and the workers at the local store who suddenly had no town to serve. How do you leave behind not just your home, but your entire world? The river shimmered in the sunlight, calm and deceptively serene, but I could almost see the memories trapped beneath the water. I closed my eyes and pictured the floodwaters rising, the frantic families scrambling to save whatever they could, and the inevitability of having to leave it all. I felt a lump in my throat just thinking about it. As I walked back to my car, I picked up a piece of broken wood that had likely belonged to a home long gone. Holding it in my hand, I realized that Scuffletown wasn't just a ghost town. It was a testament to the resilience of people who had to rebuild their lives elsewhere. carrying memories of a place that no longer existed. Driving away, I couldn't stop thinking about how fragile life can be and how quickly a community can vanish. Scuffletown left me with a deep sense of respect for those who endure such loss and a quiet sadness for the stories that will never be told aloud again. 4. Cloverport, Ohio. I had heard stories about Cloverport from my grandmother when I was a child. She would talk about the big flood in 1937 and how it changed the town forever. At the time, I didn't understand the weight of those stories. But years later, I decided to visit Cloverport myself to see the place that had haunted my family's memories for decades. Driving along the Ohio River, I could feel the history of the town in the air. The streets were quiet, lined with old trees and houses that had survived decades of change. But I knew that beneath the calm exterior, the river had once swallowed homes and livelihoods, forcing families to abandon everything they had known. I parked near the center of the old town and stepped out, feeling an odd mix of anticipation and melancholy. Walking through Cloverport, I tried to picture the town during the flood. I imagined water rushing through streets where children once played, carrying away furniture, belongings, and even the very foundations of homes. I could almost see families huddled together, trying to save what little they could, shouting over the roar of the river. The thought of losing everything in a single moment made my chest tighten. I came across an old brick wall that seemed untouched by time. Leaning against it, I let my mind wander to the lives of the people who had lived here. I thought of the shopkeepers, the teachers, and the farmers who had watched their world disappear beneath the floodwaters. I imagined their sorrow, the helplessness of seeing years of work washed away, and the strength it must have taken to leave their town and start anew elsewhere. Sitting on the riverbank, I could hear the water lapping gently at the edge. It was peaceful now, but I knew it had once been relentless. I felt a strange connection to the town, as if the memories of the people who lived there were still lingering in the air. I wondered what it was like to return to a town that had been partially abandoned, to walk streets that no longer held the laughter and chatter of families. Before leaving, I picked up a small, weathered piece of wood from the ground. Holding it, I felt the weight of history and the resilience of the people who had called Cloverport home. The town may have been scarred by floods, but it had endured in stories, memories, and fragments of its past. Driving away, I kept looking back at Cloverport, thinking about how fragile life and communities can be, yet how strong human spirit is in the face of loss. Visiting the town left me with a deep respect for its history and the people who had lived through one of the most challenging times in Kentucky's history. 5. Cloverport, Ohio River. I had always been fascinated by towns that had disappeared over time, and Old Kuttawa was one of those places that caught my curiosity. I had heard about it from a local historian who mentioned that repeated flooding had forced most of the town's residents to leave. I wanted to see for myself what remained of this town, to feel the echoes of a place that had once been home to so many families. Driving through the narrow country roads leading to Old Kuttawa, I could see how the landscape had changed over the years. The river nearby seemed calm now, but I could imagine the devastation it must have caused during the floods. When I finally reached the area where the town had once stood, there was a quiet stillness that felt almost sacred. Nature had reclaimed much of the land, but traces of human life still lingered. Fragments of foundations, old fences, and scattered bricks. As I walked around, I tried to picture life in Old Kuttawa before the floods. Children running through the streets, farmers tending to their fields, neighbors chatting by the riverbank. It all felt so alive in my imagination. Then I thought about the day the floods came, washing away homes and memories in a matter of hours. I felt a pang of sorrow, thinking about the families who had to abandon everything they had worked for, forced to start over elsewhere. How heavy that must have felt, leaving not just houses, but the very community they had built. I found a small clearing near the river and sat there, watching the water glisten in the sunlight. I tried to put myself in the shoes of someone who had lived there, watching their home disappear beneath the waves. The thought of packing up your life and leaving behind the familiar, the streets you walked every day, school where you learned, the store you shopped at was almost unbearable. I felt a lump in my throat thinking about the resilience it must have taken to keep going after such loss. As I explored further, I noticed a few remnants of personal life, a rusted metal bucket, an old fence post, and a piece of wood that probably belonged to a house long gone. Holding these items, I felt a strange connection to the people who once lived there. Old Kutawa wasn't just a ghost town. It was a story of human endurance, of lives disrupted by forces beyond their control, and of memories that continue to live on in fragments. Driving away, I kept looking back at the town, reflecting on how quickly life can change and how fragile communities can be. But I also felt a quiet sense of respect for those who once called Old Kutawa home, and a deep appreciation for the stories these towns carry, even when all that remains is the land and the river that shaped them.